Alright, cool. So hello and welcome back to the PGP. As I stated previously, I was planning on having an interview type episode series for a while now, and this marks the first one in the series. So the series will be called Impartial Discussion, and I know a lot of people voted for the Russian discussion, but unfortunately Russia doesn't have the best stereotypes currently, and I'm trying to think of like the most subliminal way to get this podcast across. So Impartial Discussion, because obviously this isn't an interview, it's just going to be a conversation, 100%. Here today we have a representative of the Conservative Party Society in the University of Leeds, Ismail. So,
hello.
Yes. I'll clarify some hot topics today with regards to the Conservative Party and such as the NHS policy and stuff like that. But before that, I'd like to conduct an interview of sorts to discuss more personal topics on being politically active in the modern day. So I also have asked some of you guys on Instagram and Snapchat to send in any questions you have to the party, so I'll be answering those as well. So without further ado, hi, nice to have you on the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be on here.
This is going to be quite interesting. Never done this before.
Neither have I, so it's going to be an interesting one. I'm really quite excited.
Yeah. All right. So let's start off with what course are you on? Like, how do you find out about the Conservative Party?
Well, actually, yeah. So this is a bit of an odd one. So I study food science and nutrition. So make that of what you will. It's not quite related to the Conservative Party. Well, it could be. I mean, there are certain aspects of food science that obviously definitely correlate to public policy, and I think I got interested in politics way before coming to university.
Oh, okay.
My choice of course was mainly to do with my sort of backup of employment. I wanted to spread as what's the word, like when you're spreading your seeds across as many different places as possible, so you can obviously harvest.
So you want to have like the nutritionist and also the
exactly party, so I can obviously, in case the politics doesn't work out, who knows, you might see me on the front bench 2 years from now. That'd be great for this podcast, great for everything. Or you might just see me working just I don't know, making products in LUU. Holland and back. So maybe so either or. So the doors are open, but we'll see as time goes on.
That's good. So how did you get involved with like the Conservative Party, like in the union?
So for me, it was a kind of a surprising one, really. So I was quite interested in politics, again, like I said, for many years. I decided in my first year that I would get far more involved, but as the years kind of went on, I didn't really have let's just say, like, with the Brexit issue, I didn't feel like I kind of had a perspective on it that was eligible for me to say much. I didn't really stand either for Remain or Leave. I just kind of just had an opinion about it. I've always been a fiscal conservative. Now that's the first aspect. I've always been someone who believes in sensible policy over everything else, and the protection of this country in a variety of manners, whether that be defence, economics, social policy, and other aspects. And I can align myself quite well with the Conservative Party in that sense. And what I mean by that is, as a party, it is quite a broad church. So people always think if you're a Tory, you think a very specific way, when that's not really true. You have a lot of different perspectives. So what made me join was, second year, there was obviously the leadership election coming up, and everyone kind of saw it coming with Theresa May. And I just felt at that time there was so much I could put in. I was finally ready to express my opinion and get involved as much as I could.
So you got your knowledge.
Exactly. I wanted to obviously express that and make an impact where I could. So I joined the party because, again, I considered myself a conservative for many years. So I got involved, and long and behold, there's a leadership election right after the councillors election, which I was also involved in. And right away, you could just see how the party was going a certain way. And my attempt was to kind of fight that and to make it be the more broad church, small c conservative party that encompasses a one nation policy that doesn't exclude anyone. It kind of involves everyone. So I failed in that.
Man, how come?
Well, I realised I didn't have as much impact in the game and the game is bigger than all of us. I really believe that being involved in politics, you learn a lot about actually how it works, definitely. You realise how little influence you have, but you also realise how little influence politicians have over the opinions they wish to express. Because as you've seen with candidates such as Rory Stewart, who is now no longer a member of the party, and people like David Gork, who are also no longer members of the party, they were the sort of politicians that I really, really backed. They were conservative, but they were very One Nation-esque. You know, they believed in a centre-right aspect of politics, where you had a fiscal responsibility to ensure the welfare of the nation's budget and the nation's finances, as well as being able to invest in the correct areas responsibly, and not just have this sort of one-sided free markets forever opinion.
So like a more pragmatic approach.
Yeah, a more pragmatic approach, and I liked it because it was honest politics. It didn't try to adhere to the vox populi, the voice of the people. It tried to avoid that, because, and I've learned this so much so now that I've been part of this process. People really have so many opinions, and rarely ever are they absolutely right. Because they're just opinions, and I think when you look at both sides, you can learn from both sides. You can really adapt and take in from both sides. But people like to align themselves with a bigger group. Often they don't like to try and negotiate. It's always just, well, I'm going to join this side, or I'm going to join this side, and that's it. Whereas, you know, I don't think it worked like that with these candidates. But again, the leadership election happened, and you had politicians trying to heal the divide, and you had politicians exemplifying the divide, pushing on the aspects of things like Brexit and other aspects. And I think this was a Brexit election for the most part, the leadership election is. And I think this general election started off as a Brexit.
But now they're kind of diverting.
Yeah, it's diverting. I think the large amounts of respect there are due to the Labour Party's policies, and they've changed the conversation away from Brexit, which I kind of really admire in that sense, because I think Brexit is taking over too much of our political space in time. So yeah, failed in that sense. Boris Johnson is now Prime Minister. How can I still call myself a Conservative when I don't support the very government that the Conservative Party seem to be backing at this moment in time? That's the real question. And it's a hard question to answer, because it encompasses many different layers of say, aspects such as loyalties, and aspects such as where I feel I can make the most impact. Now, the question here is, where do I belong in the party now? I don't agree with certain aspects of it. And the answer there is very simple. It's just that as a party, you have two options. You can either go into an organisation, and the second it doesn't go your way, you can step out of it, run away and do nothing, and join the next party and hope that they'll have the success. Or you can stay in the party, and you can consistently be a voice for change, consistently be the voice of adaptation for the party, and self-development within the party. Because as a party, if there's no one there expressing a rational opinion, then the party itself goes down a road which inevitably leads to almost a Republican Party-esque ending, which I don't believe is the case right now, but it's certainly going towards there, and I obviously would want to fight that with every tooth and nail that I have.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's quite key that you brought up the Republican Party, because I feel like a lot of people in the UK, or especially people our age at least, they seem to have this parallel where the Democrats are the Labour Party, and then the Republican Party, the Conservative Party. And it's very, very key to clarify that no, that's just not the case. Like, 100%. America is on some next. They're moving mad, essentially, in slang terms. But they're what the Conservative and the Labour Party in the UK are. They're essentially just more rational in a way. They're more. They focus on certain policies, I feel like, to get the public vote, because obviously, it's a game at the end of the day. You have to win seats, you have to win votes. But what people don't see, which is what the media doesn't report, is what they also do in the background. And I feel like if you just focus on what you see on social media and just on media in general, you essentially you're not really getting the right opinion of said party. Yeah,
exactly. So, well, it's good that you bring up social media, because I think social media has been toxic in the election, 100%. In the electoral effects of things, because the good example would be, say you're a Labourite, you vote Labour, you've always voted Labour, you love Labour, you love Labour's policies. Now, I think a lot of students can relate to this. They go on Facebook. Now, if you are a leftist, you're going to only like leftist opinions. You're going to consistently only like leftist opinions. And the problem is when you start to get most of your news and all the current affairs from Facebook and from other social media platforms, that isn't necessarily the broad both-sided, two-sided opinion that the media typically, or the BBC, so I mean, people can question that, but the BBC so-called present to the world. so what ends up happening is you go on Facebook, you only hear the opinion of the left on a certain topic, and it's consistent. You hear that every day and every day and every day. The Tories are trying to kill the poor. The Tories are trying to do this, and the Tories are trying to do that. And although it's simply not true, that opinion is ingrained in your mind.
Yeah,
because the algorithm on Facebook and Twitter, they force a sense of almost enclosure to a single opinion.
Yeah, it targets you.
Yeah, it targets you, and so therefore you end up being almost trapped by your own likes and dislikes. You can't expand out of that because Facebook itself won't let that happen. The algorithm will always focus on 100%. Getting things you want to read rather than things you should be reading. So I think that's something that as a government, as a country, as a world, we need to really consider addressing, because right now politics has become so divided. This is probably the worst it's ever been, and I really don't see a change until social media companies could really start stepping in and actually tailoring things in not such a one-sided way for people who are on these platforms.
100%. Well, we'll get onto the internet, social media a little bit more in depth further on, because I feel like we both have quite a lot of points on social media. Just to continue with this little questionnaire thing. So just to get this 100% right, so you didn't feel like you knew enough about Brexit, so you started learning about it, and eventually
I wouldn't say I didn't know. I think I was just indifferent towards it. That's the more accurate way of looking at it. I'm not someone who ever saw Europe as a problem. I never looked at Europe as a problem. In fact, I lived in an area where it was heavily populated by Eastern Europeans and whatnot. So for me, I liked that. I grew up with Albanians, Russians, Lithuanians, and all sorts. And obviously, although Russia isn't part of the EU, you get the idea of the sort of the multicultural aspect of where my background is from. I grew up in a very diverse community, and so for me, Brexit never really made sense, because it's we're all European. I considered myself, we're together in this. And I thought the Brexit issue was really focused on just the Conservative Party. And I remember hearing about Brexit way before the election, way before the referendum. Brexit was a problem in terms of the Conservative Party, but it didn't really spill outside of that. Europe was always a contentious issue in this party, but as the years went on, as the referendum was made, suddenly that went from a internal conflict within the party to actually, this is a nationwide problem. People really don't know, where to stand on this. And obviously we had the referendum results, and now we're in the mess that we're in. But I would say that you have to be so careful now when you talk about Brexit, because 100%. You will always offend one side or the other, and I'm not trying to do that. You're trying to respect both sides of the board, and that's kind of how I felt about it for a long time. It's like, okay, well, we had the referendum. Okay, it's done. We're gonna leave. Might as well just accept that. Let's make it good for everyone else, though.
Yeah, let's make a good deal. Let's leave on the best terms we can.
Absolutely. But I think now it's kind of become a case of, with the failures of the party and the failures of the current leaders and leaders before that, it really has gotten to a point of the extremists are winning, and they really are winning. And all you need to do is just open, a page of the Daily Mail, and you see that they are winning. They have every bit of control in terms of the government right now, with the extreme Brexit position that the current government is taking. It just doesn't address the problems of the people in this country. It addresses an ideological problem for the party, for politics, and for arbitrary things. But when it comes down to your life, your economics, your own way of life, and how difficult it's going to be post Brexit, they don't take that stuff into account. I really don't feel that they are. And the fact that they even risked no deal. I mean, we didn't go out with a no deal. Fantastic. The October 31st happened, we're not. But post Brexit hadn't happened. So we keep on waiting for this impending doom, and people say impending doom. Other people would say, "Oh, it's going to be a great thing." We don't know. I'll be honest. We don't know what's going to happen.
So do you feel like? Do you feel like the reason why these extremist parties, for example, like the Brexit Party, are getting so much recognition is because they're playing on a sort of popular sovereignty, where they're trying to appeal to the masses, and then they're like, well, Brexit means Brexit, and then that little town in Bedfordshire, for example, is there like, yes, Brexit means Brexit. And I feel like essentially, when the time to have Brexit went past, essentially, like within the first 2 years or whenever the first initial date was. I feel like it kind of changed the game a little bit from actually trying to deliver Brexit to now trying to, well, now we have a whole general election coming up. So like, I feel like now it's more of a who can get the most support, and then they can do whatever they want with Brexit. So like, it kind of changed from, oh, let's get Brexit done, to, oh, okay, who should now do Brexit? What should we do with Brexit?
Well, I think actually, if you look at the details and the fine print, what you start to realise is actually this isn't a fight between Brexit and not Brexit. I think the Lib Dems are taking a very strong position of anti-Brexit because I find that they're mildly being opportunists in the situation and adhering to the fact that it was a small majority that won the referendum, and so if you want to get everyone else that didn't vote that way, that's a lot of votes to the Lib Dems, if you are very staunchly Remain. This is a fight between nationalism and globalism. There's the two sides fighting against each other. I don't necessarily disagree with nationalism. I think nationalism can be a fantastic tool. It's vigorous. It brings people together. It gets the ideas out. It makes you passionate about this country.
Just for people who don't know what nationalism is.
So it is a love for your country. It is a love for the country that you're in. You don't necessarily need to be born here. I mean, that's just my opinion. You'll have nationalists arguing far more extreme ideas of it, and you'll have nationalists extremely far less intense ideas of it. But I believe, in my perspective, nationalism is a unifier of a nation. Without nationalism, you don't necessarily believe in any aspect of this country, and you don't necessarily want it to succeed, or not want it to succeed. You're just not invested. And that nationalism is an investment in a nation. Maybe not in financial terms, maybe just emotional. You love this country on an emotional level. But you can exploit that, and you can make it really bad. And I think that right now you're seeing that across the board from a lot of different political parties. Nationalism isn't defined very well to these different identities and politics, and we live in an era of identity politics that essentially means that you can define nationalism however the hell you want to define it, and so therefore there's so many different flavors of nationalism, but the one that is encompassing right now, the one that really has taken the flag of nationalism, is the Conservative Party. And what they've done is I wouldn't say the Conservative, I'd say the current government have taken it and they've twisted it into our nation will be nothing if we stay in Europe. Our sovereignty disappears. Our morals and ethics and all of that disappear with Brexit. How is that true? Is Spain still Spain? Is Italy still Italy? I love Italian wine. I love Italian food. I don't think of Italy as Europe. I think of Italy as Italy. Italy's its own thing. But even though it's part of Europe, it's a broader identity. I think that what Britain have failed in understanding, and what the people have been tricked into assuming, is that we would have our identity stripped because of Europe, and that's simply not true. I refuse to believe that. I will always stand on that position. Britain has always meant Britain. I think that we need to redefine what it means to be British, number one. I think that the twisted sense of how some people view Britain, I dare say this, and this might cost you a political career, but I think there's a inherent narcissism within the Conservative Party right now. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, I'll talk about this further on in a little bit, but it's to do with when I went to the party conference, and you just saw people who had such a warped idea of nationalism. They really believe that this is as big a problem as World War II. This is a fight between fascism and democracy. I just don't see it that way.
I think it stems from essentially after World War II, Churchill, he had the idea of I can't remember the exact precise words, but it's essentially he had three circles in a Venn diagram. You had the English-speaking world, the Commonwealth, and then I believe Europe. Let's go for Europe for now. Europe, essentially. And then the UK, I think it was Europe, actually, because in the middle of this Venn diagram, you had the UK. And that, I feel like, is basically where this main nationalism came from, where people were like, yes, we are in charge of the world. But as times went on, obviously the Commonwealth, oh my God. So as times went on, obviously the Commonwealth has deteriorated, and the English-speaking world is also not as vital, I think, as it was back in post World War II days. And I feel like a lot of people in Britain, or in Britain mainly, have focused their emotions to is trying to cling on to this false empowerment, essentially. And now with the Commonwealth essentially just falling apart and everything, you know, not being centered around the UK and America per se, people have essentially changed the blame and to... No, not change the blame, that sounds very bad. They've changed their focus to assume that it was essentially Europe, which is their problem, which is causing this lack of power, essentially. Like, the government is giving away power to Europe.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very shown in, like, things like immigration, for example, policies.
See, this is where it gets very complicated, you see. So, you know, Brexiteers don't have a single unifying position that they can take. Yeah, many, you speak to different Brexiteers, they'll talk about different problems. Yeah. They'll differ. That's the beauty of democracy in its own little way. You know, what I like is that actually Brexit isn't just one thing. You know, again, it's a variety of things, variety of different flavors. And from the people I've spoken to, some people wish a very soft and respectful Brexit where we leave on like the same deal as, say, Finland, is this common European area or something like that, whereby I think it's the EFCA. I might be wrong, but it's that sphere of influence that essentially means we stay in the single market, we leave the customs union, and there are certain aspects within that, I don't know the specifics, but that, you know, they like that sort of flavour, and there are others who can't stand that flavour. You know, they want full hard Brexit, and they want to deregulate all the markets, and they believe in free capitalism as the number one thing. That is the root reason for Brexit, is to free our markets from European imperialist identity. But you know, you look at European laws governing products and regulation, a lot of them really do benefit the public. You know, it's almost as if, I think one of the funniest aspects about Brexit is a lot of arguments I've been hearing are that people come to me and they say, well, what about these free trade deals? You know, we get to deregulate our markets, we get to take some stuff from here and there, we get to make trade deals with America and all over the world. You know, to that argument, I always say, like, you know, has the European market negatively affected your life through bad products that somehow make your life worse? I don't think so. I think actually a lot of the things that Europe have passed have been for the protection of every individual. Definitely. So it is a complicated one. Obviously, you know, if I were to make a trade deal with America, how does that affect Britain? Does it make us better or worse? We don't know. I don't think it would make us that much better. I think Europe has one of the strictest markets for a reason, because it protects its citizens at all costs. And I really do believe that. There are certain aspects of European regulation which I'm not too impressed by, but every regulatory position that they've taken and every law that they've passed in terms of products and things they can and cannot put into them, or say, for instance, food, and this always goes back to my food problem. For instance, you know, back in a certain aspect of time, you know, you can make sausages in Britain, and that was not joking. You could actually, during the 1950s, I think, this went up all the way up to that time, manufacturers could put sawdust into their sausages. You know, because you can get that. You know, I don't know why. I think something to do with flavour. Perhaps it was a cost-saving measure, or whatever it was. You don't want that in the market. You don't want that on the shelf. So you know, there were regulations that solved that problem, that stopped things like that happening. And I don't see how. Oh my God, 95% of our laws come from Europe. Oh my God, they're not laws for most of them. Most of them are just regulations that protect consumer interests. So you know, if you're a consumer, which you are, everyone in this world is. You know, it's making sure that your clothes are made of a suitable material that doesn't stick to you if you're in a very high temperature room, for example. If you're set on fire, you don't want that clothes to actually be the cause of your death, and things like that. It's little things like that, and they do add up, and they do protect us in the grand scheme of things. I can't name a single one on the top of my head, because again, these documents are huge, and to expect, you know, anyone to have read all through them and start talking like they're an absolute expert would just be ludicrous. You know, you need lawyers and things like that to really get into the nitty and gritty of it. Where I think Europe has failed, and this is where it comes down to this, it's the lawyer aspect, is the level of bureaucracy. It's the level of unquestioned, you know, power that resides within Europe and Brussels. Now that's something I can agree with.
Do you mean within Brussels in particular? Or
within the whole European, Brussels being like the centre of the European, the European enterprise, the European entity, the identity of Europe itself, the whole institution of Europe. That is problematic. how do we elect commissioners, and how do we hold to account these individuals if they fail to do certain aspects of, like, so if they fail to disclose certain things, or if they are dealing in things and we don't know, that's the reality is we don't know what they're doing. Tell me what you know that Jean-Claude Juncker has done in the past year, apart from the Brexit part. What does he do behind closed doors? No one ever questions these things. So, in that sense, I do see where the Brexiteers are coming from. So there are certain aspects of Brexit that I can definitely relate to. And that's definitely. There is a sense of mistrust with, if you're a Brit sitting in England, or from Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland, and you're looking at, and you're wondering, these regulations, as a business owner, do they benefit me or do they negatively benefit me? And who do I go to if I want to change these or I want to challenge these? No, you don't know. In England it's quite easy. You'd think you just go to Parliament and talk to your local MP who'd bring it up, and then Parliament will decide on it, and that's as easy as that. But in Europe, who do you actually go to?
Yeah. I've seen this thing which was essentially the definition of colonialism is governing from a distance.
Yeah.
And people have linked that to the European Union, where they say that Brussels and like Germany or Germany, France, UK essentially pretty much govern all these other little countries like Moldova and like Estonia and all these little countries which are not essentially what happened with Greece, for example.
Yeah. Well,
so it's where I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, where Greece's monetary policy, which has to be aligned with what Brussels says, because they're in one union.
They're in the same currency. They can't promise to borrow more when they're when their deficit is off the chart.
Exactly.
They can't promise to fix their national service, their public services and whatnot. If they don't have the money to do that, and their currency is at risk because they can't start printing more money. They can't stabilize their economy because they don't have control over their own currency.
They don't have the fiscal policy side, but obviously fiscal policy can go as far as
very dangerous. And in that aspect, I think the euro is a huge. It's a questionable one. I don't think it's a failure. I think it could be improved. I understand where it comes from and the notion of it. In fact, when I look at Europe, I kind of see a young America in the making.
Definitely.
And I think of Britain as almost Texas. Really just a Lone Star state. Doesn't want to be part of it at all. It's trying to run away at all costs. And what's interesting though, is how Britain thinks itself as the oppressed in this situation. Which is funny because you bring up countries like Moldova and Estonia and Lithuania, who are all part of the same union, but they have no voice in Europe, hardly. It is France, Germany, and the UK.
Yeah, and it's quite funny that the UK, which is one of the most influential,
it's the one of the most think that they have no power in that table. So that's another reason I thought we should have stayed in the European Union, because we had a great deal of influence. We were one of the three major players in that game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And we don't play that game anymore. Europe's not going anywhere. So either we charter our own course, which might be fantastically successful in 20, 30, 1 generation, 2 generations time. But in the short term, in the long run, it's all questionable. It all comes down to whether or not we are willing as a country to be part of a united Europe, which we need to question. We need to ask these sorts of questions. A lot of Remainers would dare never ask that. They're like, well, it's never going to happen, so there's no, it could.
Yeah,
because
could.
That's what the European project's all about. It's about uniting Europe under a single banner.
Yeah.
No more war can happen if World War II can never happen again if there is no other country in Europe except the European Union. So it'd be the United States of Europe almost,
Yeah, pretty much.
And there are people in this country who want that, and there are people in this country who don't want that. But the referendum happened, and the vote came through. Regardless of how educated you were or not, your voice is fortunately accepted in democracy, and so you have to accept the results of that referendum. So, from my perspective, Brexit has to happen. How? Definitely. That is the hard part. That's the hard question.
I feel like we've been talking about Brexit for a while.
Because it does take up so much of everything, doesn't it?
Brexit is pretty much like the most important thing that anyone could be talking about. But in the moment, I feel like due to its many effects, many layers to it. Let's take a few steps back to you on a more personal level. So essentially, the way this will go is just explaining to the audience. We'll have a few questions to Ismail just to explain certain, just to give him more of an insight into what just an average Conservative supporter feels like, looks like, etc. Then we'll go on to questions towards the Conservative Party, towards their policies for the general election, and we'll question stuff like austerity and all of that good stuff. And then we'll talk about Brexit in a bit more depth, like with a bit more of a specific skeleton, essentially. So how would you say? Now, what advice would you give to people who would want to reach your level of understanding of politics and like participation, but who feel like there's so much, especially right now with Brexit and like the general election, who feel like there's so much to know that it's pointless trying to even start? Like, what would you say would be the first step?
Well, the first step is to throw that opinion that you don't know anything out the window, because when it comes down to it, your opinion matters. Whether you know something about something or you don't, your opinion matters. So get involved, get stuck in. If you have an opinion, regardless of how intensely depthful it gets, it's a learning process. Life is a learning process. If you want to get involved in something and you have a passion to want to make a change, that's all it takes. That's the first step. Think about something in your life that you would want changed, or want to maybe continue, perhaps, and something that's under threat that you want to protect. So from that perspective, you start at that point. You have a belief. You stick to that belief. Don't stick to it blindly. Obviously, if you learn something new that changes that opinion. But have a moral stance on something. That's the first logical thing when you want to get involved in politics. Because a lot of politicians, they don't get involved for moral reasons. They get involved for their own personal game, career politician games. So try and avoid that. I think that's the first thing. If you want to get active, if you want to join the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats, start off by looking at your local association. So go onto the party's website, regardless of which party. They all should have that information on their website. If you're a student at the university, then get involved through the countless number of political societies that are involved in the university and in the union. Actually, what's really funny is there are so many more associations and societies than people think there are. So there isn't just a Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrats and the Greens, and that's it. It doesn't work like that. There are there are associations for everything. If you feel like you don't necessarily agree with any of these parties, but you're very firm on prison reform, well, there's a prison reform society here, so you can join that one. That'd be great, and it's a great position to start in, because if you're passionate about something, you want to make a change, go for it. If you're someone who believes in feminism really, really strongly, and you want to change the world from that lens, from that perspective, then there's the LUU feminists who are more than happy to take you on and to educate you in certain aspects that you may not know. And when I joined the party for the Conservatives, I didn't know certain aspects of the Conservative Party, and there were certain things that I really had no idea about. That's the culture and the in-depth knowledge of MPs and what they do and their position on things and the wide array of opinions within the party. I thought when I came in, it would be a very one-sided game between my opinion, which is quite liberal, conservative, and the rest of the party or the association. Turns out the association is quite varied. You have different people, different opinions, and you do have them. You do have a majority opinion and a minority opinion, and I would definitely consider myself in the minority. But there is a broad church. Again, they spread, and people's ideas are different. We have one member of the society. I'm not going to say what his name is, but he's actually a socialist, inherently, but questionable here. He calls himself a national socialist. I don't obviously mean national socialist in that sense. I think maybe we could question that in the longer aspects of things. But no, he believes in this idea of unifying the country through socialist nationalism. So helping out each other, and that develops a country, which rationally is a fantastic idea. I'm not so much on that level.
But he is still in the Conservative Party.
He's in the Conservative Association, which is so he's not a member of the party, but he's a member of the society. So you don't have to be a member of a party to be a member of a society. Yeah. So joining the society is a great way to get started. And then if you feel, you want to be part of this party, you want to make an impact, then join the party full on. And then you can start making a difference. You start campaigning for them. You start going into their surgeries that they hold, which are basically these little meetings and where they discuss policy. In fact, there was last year in the summer we had a Conservative, what's it called? The CPS, Conservative Policy Forum. which was this annual event where people would come together and there would be these big questions about how they want to change Yorkshire. And this, I was in the Yorkshire one.
Yeah.
So they were talking about, we want Yorkshire to have more autonomy, and some people were really arguing for that, and there were other people arguing for other things, and HS2 and this and that. And you start to learn a lot about the local politics when you get involved in these sorts of things. So I definitely say get involved, get out in there, make a change. And if you don't feel like you know enough, don't feel like that's enough of a reason to not get involved, because knowledge comes through participation. And you just be wary of one-sided opinions, and try and always open yourself up to other ones, because it gives you more of a broad depth view. And then once you do have that broad view, you can make a more certified decision on where you want to stand on certain things.
All right. Well, this goes out to everyone who spoken to me about not thinking that they have enough of information to join anything political. So yeah, get stuck in really. So now let's take a little bit of a turn to the Conservative Party specifically. A lot of people have problems with like austerity and stuff like that, so I just want to, if you just could in a few words explain like how were the policies of the Conservatives in the past affecting you essentially, and how did they affect you now?
So I think the number one thing is when people listen to this podcast, they'll assume from my accent, they'll assume from my tone of voice that somehow I'm part of this upper bourgeois class of people that really just get stuck in. And my dad works in a bank or something, and I get so much money, and I just have more money than sense, and which isn't true. Number one is that I lived in a council flat my whole life. My mother was on benefits for the longest period was during my childhood. Yeah, so between me being 4 and about 15, she was on benefits, and then I lived I'd say quite well, but I lived decently. I would call myself. I wouldn't say I suffered that much, thanks to the state providing. That was actually under a Labour government, and then austerity hit, and then obviously the Conservative Party comes in. There's an economic crisis. Austerity hits. Suddenly, my mum has to get a job at Tesco. She has to get a job. She had no option. She had to go to work. And even though, we're still quite young, my brother and I, and we required my mum to be at home, and I had to stay at school for extra hours because mum wasn't home. She was at work. So, of course it affected the home big time. My mum didn't have money to buy new clothes for me at certain times, and I really despised her for it. I really hated her for it. But then I realised over time, actually, that's not her fault. That's simply the fault of many other factors. Would I say I blame the government for that? No, I'll be honest with you, I don't, because it's a two-way game. And I'm not hitting on my mum's work ethic ever. I think there was plenty of reasons why she was in the position she was in. Plenty of explanations as to why she couldn't work and why she did. But she's a very comfortable individual. She doesn't like. She was never someone who felt like she should take the risk to try bigger and more adventurous roles in work, and to try and increase her status in a workplace to try and get more money, because that wasn't what she did. She was quite new, fresh to the country. She didn't really understand English that well, and so there are a lot of factors that are involved. Do I blame austerity? Not necessarily.
So
And
just for the listeners at home, could you define austerity? Like what exactly?
Okay, so austerity was basically when the government, the Conservative Party came into power during 2009, I think it was. There was some severe public spending measure cuts that were made in order to reduce the deficit, and the deficit was basically the amount we borrow compared to the amount we have, so the amount what we borrow, the percentage of
our
what
GDP.
borrowing, yeah. So that basically was an all-time high. And the Conservative Party came in, and it was under David Cameron and George Osborne and Nick Clegg, who was a coalition government, and they passed a lot of measures to cut public spending by proportions which disproportionately affected the poorest in our society, including myself and my family. I wasn't necessarily the most proud of austerity. I don't think it's something that is beneficial to a society, especially if a society wishes to grow and develop. You can't cut services. Once you cut them, then that generation really do suffer. But at the same time, I've always been someone who believes, and this is where my fiscal conservatism comes in, that sometimes a generation takes a hit so that the next generation can actually have that spending. Because if we continued spending during the years of 2008-9 and didn't stop, we wouldn't have the ability to pledge spending like we are today. And no one's really questioning why the Conservative Party are pledging so much. Maybe it's an election tactic, maybe it's not. But I genuinely believe that our ability to spend in this generation, I wouldn't say it's been a generation away, it's been about 10 years, this decade, has been because of the sensible policies undertaken by David Cameron and George Osborne during that period from 2009 onwards. Did it? Yeah. So would I say that I'm someone who was properly negatively affected? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, I was provided with that free education that I desperately needed. I was provided with the opportunity to go to university, which I fully took on board and maximised. Yeah, what opportunities given to me? Bless yourself. What opportunities given to me? Yes. And so, can I stand here now, a third-year university student, claiming the government did nothing for me and that I should hate them? No, because at the end of the day, if I can make it to the position I'm in, and maybe I'm being a little selfish here when I say this, because there are definitely families out there who that weren't in the same position I'm in. I think they could have been way worse. So I don't know. It is a complicated answer, but for me, my personal experience was that although public spending did go down under my life, and I could clearly see that in the community I lived in, there were still people who managed to get out of that situation, to find a better life and to work hard for a good life. And I'm not saying you have to work really hard. If you work hard enough, you're going to get out of it. Because there are people who are disabled, for example, who really did suffer under austerity and didn't deserve that. So I think austerity could have worked better. There could have been more efficient cuts done that didn't need to affect people as negatively as it did. Yeah. So smart moves, it goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I completely agree with you with the fact that it goes both ways, and I feel like this is a very, very fine line that you can cross so easily by saying, if you don't work hard, then that's why you're poor. But personally as well, so I have two little sisters, grew up with my parents in London, and when the financial crisis struck, my parents knew that they had to change what they were doing, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but essentially they did what they have to do, right? And they did everything that they had to do for them to get me into the university, to get my little sisters into school and all that stuff, and to give us a good life. Like we now go on holidays at least once a year, because my parents work their arse off so that they can go on that holiday. And it's like, I feel like when people say that, think about what about all the disabled people who did get affected very negatively by austerity. I feel like that is focusing the argument on a very, very minute minority, and by doing so you essentially you swipe away the fact that in a way, to the extent to which it was necessary is arguable, but in a way it was necessary, as you said, to make certain cuts to allow, as you said, the future generation to benefit.
Absolutely. But would I say there were failures in austerity? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So it wasn't a perfect game. It wasn't a perfect policy cut, because what essentially happened is, in one aspect, we did decrease the deficit, and it was successful in many different ways. There was a long-term economic strategy, and it worked, because our economy grew, and we got out of recession. We managed to fix our economy in such a way that, from the long-term perspective, I think now we have that spending ability that we would have never had we continued in the path we were going. But that's a nationwide view. And that's the thing. This is where I come back to the nationalism part. So if you were a nationalist, you would see that sacrifice and you would take it as, this is a united effort. Together as a country we will suffer, but together as a country we'll come out of it, and we will have a better future. Okay, and a few hard years come at the cost, is the cost and the price you have to pay for many good years. And that's how I always saw austerity. And although my friends never saw it that way, they said, forgive me, F the government, this or that. That just wasn't, that's a very individualistic way of looking at it. You look at it from, they affected me personally. For some people, those who really didn't have anything, the disabled who had to go for job checks suddenly because, there were such intense cuts that, people who clearly were in wheelchairs couldn't work a day were now being forced to go into these interviews where they had to be checked and vetted and make sure that they definitely can't work, which wasn't acceptable. There had to been altercations
definitely
in how that policy was implemented. But I think the long-term strategy came in, and I think that now we're not living on austerity. I think we should stop looking at austerity as this consistent stain on the Conservative Party. I don't think it was a stain at all. I think it was it just shows why conservatism is what it is. It is the fiscally responsible. Like when your mother, and this is a good thing, if your mother takes you to McDonald's, right? I always use this analogy because it's one of the best ones. If she takes you to McDonald's, you love her so much. Oh my gosh, my mum is the best mum in the whole world. Oh, I'm so lucky to have this parent. But there are other days when you're at school and you're like, Mom, please, I want to go to McDonald's. No, we have food at home.
And
then that argument, it's that you don't know why she's saying that. But what do you mean? But last week we went to McDonald's. I don't get it. You hate her. You take it so personally. But there are reasons. And I definitely say there are reasons to why austerity had to happen. I don't agree with the Labour perspective, and I'll never agree, and I'm going to say this once and for all, I'll never agree with the Labour policy, the identity of Labour supporters that say that austerity didn't need to happen. It did. If Labour wouldn't have done it, our country would fail. I believe that.
I feel like people may assume that had there was like a Labour government in place or something like that, they would have, instead of cutting, for example, public spending on like necessary things, they instead would have focused on getting the money from like big corporations, and essentially what Labour always want to do. Would you say that? I know we're kind of going off topic again.
I think it's a very relevant question.
Do you think that people essentially would get less austerity if the cuts were focused on more?
That's a good question, and there's two ways of answering it, and luckily you study economics, so you know this one, right? When you impose high taxes on wealthy companies and companies that potentially could bring in a lot of wealth to the country, we're talking the Amazons and we're talking the Googles, and I don't necessarily agree that the way we're taxing them right now is not acceptable. I think we should be more effective with our taxing and how it works. They should close the loopholes, but I don't believe that we should increase the tax to a ridiculous level that makes us uncompetitive.
And that's what Labour wanted to do.
That's Labour wanted to do that, and then they still do. And it affects governments, and it affects people, and it affects your ability to find a job. Like, you're a university student, as am I. And I think everyone who listens to this podcast, mostly, hopefully, a lot of people will be university students. Which means that when they finish university, they'll expect employment. But where does that employment come from? Employment doesn't come from nowhere. There are companies who start off by either developing a service or a product. They give that service or the product to the public. The public respond either well or poorly to it. If they respond well to it, you develop as a company. You grow to the point where you have enough capital where you can start hiring people. Now imagine instead that you develop that capital to such a point where it's, you make £1 million profit. Now you could use that £1 million to invest and create more workforces that could improve and increase productivity, while at the same time hiring from the local communities and actually employing people, giving that wealth to the workers, which in turn creates a cyclical economy. That's one way of looking at it, and that's fantastic. Or the other way is you tax all of that wealth, so the government takes that money and then they create that wealth independently. Now the problem is that we don't live in an ideal world, and this comes back to nationalism again. A lot of these companies aren't from here. They're not built in Britain. They come from all over the world. So if Ireland are offering a tax rate half that of Britain, what do you do in that situation as a country, or as a company? Sorry, you will pack up your bags and go. End of story. You're not even going to question it. You would do that. I would do that. Every rational economic mind would think and do that. They're not greedy for doing that. They just want to look out for their own interests, as we all do.
100%.
And that's where the difference between Conservatives and Labour is. I really feel like one can accept that people do think for their own interests, and we maximise on that self-interest while collecting enough to provide for the whole population. Labour believe, on the other hand, I really believe that they think, no, everyone thinks in a blasé, loving way. No one looks out for their interests. Everyone's looking out for each other. It doesn't work like that. So we have to be so careful with radical policy.
So you essentially believe that what was done was right. However, a lot more, well, not a lot more per se, but like definitely changes to what was done could have potentially benefited the country in better ways.
Yeah.
So like you don't agree 100% with the Conservative policies.
I think they could have done more. They could have done way more.
Yeah.
They could have done better things more effectively, more efficiently. And I think this is where special interests come in. And you know, there are definitely problems in terms of government, and this isn't just a Conservative problem. It isn't just a Labour problem. It is every party and every politician come into this risk of being bought out by a company that it promises them a future in that company if in exchange they protect that company's interests when in government, which, you know, happens all the time. You see it in America particularly, and it's happening here a lot more often, which is why we need to reform our political system so that people can't work after they retire from Parliament. And I think that stops the idea that they can move into other companies and be promised big jobs and big salaries if they help them during their political career. So yeah, there are definitely problems, and I would say the Conservatives are not free of sin.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's one of the main things with regards to stuff like this, is that one of the main like key bits of information they have to bring out is that a lot of people assume, oh, he supports the Conservatives, he supports austerity 100%, they support this 100%, they support that 100%. If you support Labour, you support Corbyn 100%, all that stuff. Like, really and truly, as you said, it's very broad. It's a spectrum.
It's true.
And
it's true.
It's just that Conservatives is an umbrella term for one side of the spectrum, the right side, and then Labour is an umbrella term for the other side of the spectrum. And, you know, you wouldn't really say, oh, you know, you like colours. That doesn't necessarily mean that you like red, green, blue in general. You just like, for example, one of those colours on the spectrum. But yeah, moving on slightly. So you brought it up a little bit earlier. So do you support Boris Johnson or just the party in general?
So as a character, I think Boris Johnson's hilarious. He's an absolute character. He makes me laugh. So from an individual's perspective, if I were to know him from a one-to-one level, and I've met him twice, he's a funny guy. So from a personal level, I think he's a lovely guy. Yeah. But as a leader, I don't think he's the most suitable individual to run this country in the fractured state as it is, because what he is not a unifier. He is a divider. Because he doesn't try to accommodate for both sides. I don't think his character so far has proven that. He does not attempt to unify the nation with compromise. And people think of that word as a very dirty word. I don't think it is. Compromise. I think it's a great word. I think politicians should use it more often, and I think they should be acting in that way more often. Because I think he's so, it almost makes him more popular with his supporters. The more hardline he is, the more brittle he is, unable to move and just breaks it if unable to negotiate anything else except what he has originally said.
Do you feel like that's on one side what the country may be looking for, with all these like unknowns about Brexit and what's going to happen?
So there is a certain sense of security, and that's why he's so popular. When I go door to door, and I have gone campaigning 2 or 3 times, I'm the minority in the opinion I have about Boris Johnson. People actually love him. Everyone I've spoken to so far, and I really think he's going to win a landslide in this election. He is loved by the people because of his certainty of his position. Yeah, definitely. And in an age of uncertainty, what you want is certainty. Yeah. And no matter how it comes, with whatever haircut he chooses to bring in display, it's genius.
So you say you go door to door. So just quickly, so that means that there are people who support. This is door to door, just like around the Leeds.
Yeah. So it's Leeds. I've gone around So I've gone down to London as well. I've done a bit of campaigning there with my local MP, and I've done a bit of campaigning up here in the north, and all of them, you see a real support for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a massive chamber, like an echo chamber of university students, where they feel like once they step into the real world, it's all going to be, you know, Labour. But the reality is that a lot of people support the Conservatives.
Well, that's just simple. It is simply true.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's funny because, you know, being at university, I'm far less conservative than I would otherwise be outside of university, because and this is my aspect of being aware of the environment I'm in. People in this university think in a very echo chamber way aspect that, you know, that if one person says Labour, all you hear is Labour, all you hear is left, socialism, and it's so strong, and it resonates really, really strongly, especially at universities. Definitely. Outside of university, if you were to drive out of this university right now and drive up to Otley,
which is like a 10-minute drive from here.
10-minute drive, just north. Knock on a few doors there, knock on every road, every building. I promise you, you're going to find so much support for the Conservative Party, because he is the popular choice, and the country as a whole support his flavour of Brexit. They support his flavour of nationalism. They support his flavour of how the world should be, and I think it comes two ways, and it goes back to what I said earlier on. How you are able to exploit behaviours and maximise on them. Labour do it as well, you know, with their supporters, and it's seen on both sides of every political campaign ever fought. It's not just the Conservative Party doing this. You see where your supporters are insecure about a certain area. They don't feel confident in this certain aspect of how the country's being run. So what do? You promise to deal with that. It's as simple as that. And some people might find that radical, but
that's just how it is.
It's just how it really is. So I don't know how to answer to someone who doesn't agree with them, because, you know, at the end of the day, if they feel a certain way, and the party is now aligning themselves to the opinions of these people, either they are the most democratic, or they're most exploitatory, which they exploit the people the most. You can either look at it in those two lenses, and it really does depend on how you look at it. I look at it as they're just going towards what the people want. I don't necessarily think that's right, because I don't think that people know what's best for the country. They know what's best for themselves,
but not for the country.
But they don't know what's best for the country. And sometimes, you know, you might be living up the road in Otley with a good life and everything's fine, but there's a council estate 40 minutes the other way, and they really aren't living very well, and they have that those two people can't relate. So it's important for a politician to be able to access both sides, which I think Boris Johnson isn't doing very well right now. But you know, he is popular. So
I feel you. We've essentially answered a few of these questions in this discussion, but before we go into the general Conservatives' policies, just one last thing. So do you not agree with Labour's policies, or do you dislike them on a personal level?
No, I like Labour as a party. You know, a good opposition provides great challenges.
It's a competition.
It's a great it's like a business. Like if you're a free market capitalist, you need to love competition. Because competition is what drives innovation. It drives better policy. It drives better thinking. Labour have taken on a position that doesn't compromise, much like Boris Johnson, uncompromising politics. You know, Labour are so certain of their disdain for the Conservatives that with this new Corbynite ideology that has gripped the Labour Party, there's no room for discussion, an actual real discussion about why certain policies may or may not seem effective. For instance, the new policy that they announced today about free broadband sounds amazing, but it's so unreasonable, because it might, you know, from the costing and from the general, like this would be the 5th or 6th promise of huge spending made by the Labour Party.
By the way, the broadband promise, if you haven't seen, is essentially by 2030, Corbyn said that Labour will deliver, was it 4G? Or no,
so it'd be for fibre optic broadband across the country.
To every
home. Every home would have it. And
by 2030.
You know, great and innovative, fantastic. And, you know, every country should be aiming for that. And they always like turn back to like, well, look at the Korean model. Well, the Korean model worked on that idea years before, and the cost of things have radically changed. And you know, it's not like we work on the same principle as South Korea. We have different laws, different ways of doing things, and so therefore
different landscape as well.
Yeah, different landscapes and huge challenges that may hold back such projects and may increase the cost. Whenever Labour say it's just going to cost 20 billion, don't worry. HS2 was predicted to be about only
the high speed train.
Yeah, high speed train that went across from London to the north. It was meant to only cost I think it was, if I'm correct, somewhere around the 5 billion mark. I don't know, maybe it could have been less.
When it was initially.
Yeah. That is not the case, clearly, anymore.
I think how many times did it go up in price?
I think it went up about 4 times, and then they still haven't cut this project because it needs to be finished now. That's when you start a project, you can't finish it. You just have to keep funding it until it's done. So number one, there are always delay costs, and you need to consider those. There's number two, where does that money come from? Is it a secure line of income for this investment? All of these questions simply aren't being answered. John McDonnell spoke about selling bonds and whatnot, and doing something along the lines of that, which it didn't really look into that much. But I'm almost certain that if I took that to an economist, they could probably break down reasons as to why that can't happen. Because again, this is an argument I've always said: if a policy works, the policy should be implemented. And it's very hard to see Labour's policies in an umbrella to all work in cohesion with one another. I definitely say if they were to invest in anything, they should choose one of those policies and stick with it, because I don't think all of those policies are going to come through. I think if they did come into power, they're going to let down their own support base, because those policies are going to negatively impact this entire country. So on a personal level, I don't hate Labour. I see what they're trying to do. I admire what they're trying to do. They're trying to make the world a better place, as we all are. I think the difference between my flavour of how politics should work and how their flavour of how politics should work comes down to how much they're willing to radically change the world around them in order to accommodate for these changes, right? These policies. So Conservatives take this position, and it's a very old position, and it's that we don't know how society came about. Period. We just know that we exist and we're in a society. This is society. Welcome.
Without written records.
We have no. There's no starting point. It just started. Society is just a thing. It's always existed. We don't know how to restart a society. So if we were to build one from scratch, we wouldn't know how to do it. Like, where do we start?
I feel like we've got too big.
There's too many things. Too many things to kind of like to take control over. So because we don't know that, let's only make slight adjustments to accommodate for as many people as we can, without being so radical as to damage the foundations of society itself. Whereas Labour, I don't feel like Labour have that precautionary assumption of the world, because I feel like I don't know, maybe they just don't follow economic policy very well. Maybe they just didn't think about it very well. I don't know. But it gets very complicated, and this is where it gets very meta, and you can start asking the very deep questions about whether or not social policy is actually the driver of economic growth, or whether it's the stability of a government that defines economic growth. You never really know.
All right, perfect. I had a couple more questions, but we are I never thought I'd say this, we're running out of time.
Oh my gosh.
It's 4:12, so we only have 48 more minutes to discuss a lot of things. I am thinking we could have another session like this.
I would love
another 2 hours.
Brilliant.
So would you, I guess in 40 minutes, since we started off with discussing Brexit and like all these issues, we could save the questions on the Conservative Party for the next session, because I feel like there is a lot of things to talk about, like a lot of information to discuss.
Absolutely.
And I guess continue now with Brexit and just like the party perspective for this one, for the next like 40 minutes.
Absolutely.
Which is, I know it's a bit of a letdown, because I've promised a lot of people, I don't know how many people actually care, by the way, I never actually revealed, but not a lot of people. I'm estimated at about 20 people listening to the podcast, but I do only have like 7 episodes.
Well, do you know what, I hope that me promoting this podcast,
do
you know what, I don't know if I should post it on my Facebook, because I'm worried that all the Conservatives are going to hate me for the things I've said today.
No, it is. It's like, it's amazing to me why so many people are just so not open-minded. Like, I never understood how someone who has an education, and I know this may sound disrespectful or whatever, but I never really understood how anyone who knows about the world can ever see it as black and white, can never see it as two sides to a coin. Like, there's so much things that you have to consider. And I've heard I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson.
I love it.
He's for people who don't know, which is surprising if you're listening to the podcast, but he's a clinical psychologist lecturer, and he says that majority of our thoughts are just wrong. The initial thoughts that you have when you see someone, when you think about what to eat, like the majority of things that you initially think in the first 2 seconds come from your subconscious mind, obviously, and most of them are wrong. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that. They feel like what they initially think is good enough, like it's correct enough, and then they categorize their opinions as facts in a way, and they know that it's not facts, but the way they bring it across is factual, essentially. Do you would you say that essentially it's like just simply bad arguments that people make, or do you think it's like the desire for people to just get their opinions heard, whether they're right or not, and just
I think it's a little mix of both. But going back to what you said about people's opinions, it's important to realise that life is a learning curve. It's consistent. What I might say today, I might disagree with myself tomorrow. But I think
100%.
it's about having the ability to question yourself. I think that's where a lot of people, especially people who are of conviction, and these are many of the politicians, supporters of political parties, they go in with a lot of conviction about something. They really believe in what they have to say, and they are so passionate about it that if they were slapped in the face with a fact, they simply dismiss it because it doesn't align with their belief and their vigor of belief, and they'll find any way to kind of go around that question but never really answer it. I think as a society we need to come together in realizing that we're all flawed as individuals and that we don't know particularly anything. And this is a very existential statement I'm about to make, because this is something that I think on a daily basis. It's the realization that I don't know anything.
It's mad that you say that. I have an episode on that, and this pretty much that's like the focus. You're right. We really just don't know anything.
I don't know. I don't know. They don't know. No one knows anything. And to assume someone knows everything is just ludicrous, number one. But number two, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that because you don't know anything that you don't hold opinions. So I can't say I know anything for fact. That's certain. That's what I can do. There's 100%, nothing 100%. I can tell you that I'm like, this is a fact. Even the colour of milk, I cannot tell you that it is white 100%. That's my perspective of white.
Definitely.
But I can give you perspectives. I can give you my assumption. It looks pretty white.
I feel like a lot of people, they just don't see the world that way.
They don't, because they've been taught to assume there's something called smart and not smart, and smart people know things and dumb people don't know things. When actually, I think it's vice versa. So that's not vice. I think it goes the other way. So it's smart people are the ones who really question everything, just consistently question things. I find that the smartest people in the world are those around me who literally can say one thing and then backtrack on that thing because they've realised that actually that thing might have other ways of looking at it. That's 100%. How I see intelligence, because the ability to see different perspectives, consistently seeing that there's more than one opinion and one way of looking at things. Whereas someone who I think is very, almost, I wouldn't say like an imbecile, but like someone who really doesn't know about the world, are those who take an opinion, they process it in their mind as absolute fact, and that's it. If they're struck with an alternative opinion, that doesn't count, because even though it's even though the validity of that is relatively the same, they just won't accept it. We could talk about all different areas where this comes into play, but a good example would be things like Brexit. Remainers are idiots for thinking that it's going to be the doom of our economy. Brexiteers are idiots for thinking that it definitely won't. So I think it's about accepting that it could be both. We don't know, and I think that the safer choice would probably be, to deliver on the will of the people, but in a way that accommodates for the most minimal amount of damage possible.
Definitely. I feel like I've read or heard, I can't remember now, but it was a piece on psychology essentially, and it was on why it's so difficult to take the fact that you are wrong in a certain statement or in a certain scenario. And it's because essentially what happens is consciously you try to find excuses, you're trying to find any evidence to back that you're right. No matter where you got it from, no matter what the evidence is, your brain will automatically, naturally try to assume you're right. But also, subconsciously, what happens is your subconscious mind is meant to protect you as an individual, and one of the things they protect is how you feel you're right. And when someone essentially attacks your hierarchy of wisdom, if you like, your subconscious brain instantly tries to block that. So if someone says the NHS is going to get privatized, and then I reply, no, it's not, that's just not how it works, they will automatically try to block that. Not even try, they will automatically block what I say, and they'll put on this filter of oh, he's not right, but I am. And I feel like the best way as an individual who wants to become more wise, who wants to become more intelligent, the best thing to do is to realize that, there's a lot of quotes to be fair, but I think one of the most popular quotes is wisdom is, what is it? It's wisdom is wanting more knowledge, or the yearning for more knowledge, or something.
It's realizing that I think it's like Socrates said, wisdom, realizing is nothing, and so therefore the wisdom is truly that this desire to always want to know more about the world, and you're never satisfied with what you know. You always want to look for new ideas, and you always want to look at new perspectives and new characteristics and ways of defining things. There's 1,000 definitions for one term, and I could we could go into depth about linguistics here and how that works and how you can bring that into the case. But absolutely, you're absolutely right. But it's important that we don't ourselves fall into that trap. Because even people who question themselves have a sense of arrogance about, well, I'm questioning it, so therefore at least I have more than one opinion, so therefore I must be the most intelligent. I think it's just settling away and putting away the narcissism. I think the term intelligent is a narcissistic term. It tries to promote you as an individual. It tries to put you onto this pedestal, which I don't think we should be doing as humans anymore. I think we realize now as humans, we should have realized that all this innovation, all of this development, this ability that we've gone from a tribal sort of, living in huts 8,000 years ago to now living the most lush lives, ever within our history. We talk about inequality going up, on a grand scale of things. No, we've not. We have decreased inequality hugely. There are some people who live in huge houses, and there are some people who live in tiny houses. But then none of us live in huts anymore. In England, hopefully, well, unless you're homeless, God bless them. Sorry to hear that. But you get the idea. You get my point about this point. We need to realize that it is together as a collective that we are smart. It is only as a collective where people can accept everyone's opinion and come to a conclusive sort of, using all the compromises that we can make, here's the best option,
the most pragmatic. Two minds is better than one.
It's not the ideal for anyone. But that's what makes it good. No one person is winning more than the other, and that's I think is the beauty of good democracy at work. When no one's satisfied.
You could say that in the UK currently no one's really satisfied.
So we're doing a great job. But it has been the most democratic time. I want to illustrate. It has been the most democratic time to be a Brit, because in our history, I don't think we've had this much political engagement ever. I don't think people have had opinions on politics on this level ever. This is a time to get involved. And when we talk, it's gotten as bad as it's ever gotten. Well, actually, this is probably how democracy really should be. Always arguing, consistently trying to argue points and trying to come across with different ideas.
But that's the thing.
It's just like finding a good mediator. I think that's where we fail. Finding the good middle ground where we can put those ideas together. So that's where we fail right now. I think it's that middle ground.
And I feel like that leads us lovely not lovely in an adjective way, adverb. It leads us very well into the next question of, how do you feel social media and the internet affect this? Because obviously we've touched on it before, but just like to go really, really nitty gritty. Like you say that we need a mediator. Do you feel like social media in particular, and also like media in more broad terms, have basically disallowed for that medium to occur? Because now if you say, and this is more also like a part B, like a more personal question, like how do you feel as a conservative on social media? Do you feel like if you make a post saying this, that and the other, you'll get attacked? Or
do you know, it's funny, I despise social media. I absolutely can't stand it, but I understand its benefit. Right? I personally hate it.
So are you on social media?
I am on social media. You can add me on Facebook, Ismail Zuta. But I absolutely hate it because I'm not scared of people who disagree with me. I'm scared of people who do agree with me, because that can turn at any point because of one thing you say or do. I'm scared of my supporters rather than my people who object with me. If people frivolous just dislike me as an individual, fine, I understand their position. It's very easy to classify them and, okay, they won't agree with me. No matter what I say, they won't agree with me, so it's fine, don't care. But it's the people, my Facebook. So for instance, if I want to criticize the party, or if I want to criticize, what I think is wrong, and this is an internal belief, it's not about party politics, removing myself from that tribal mindset of I am with this side. If I make a comment that makes a negative statement about the party, I'm attacked by the very people who I'm meant to be supporting.
That's interesting.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And I get this harassment from Conservatives and Labourites and Liberal Democrats, and all. It's not about party either. Individuals who just love being keyboard warriors. They love to call people out. They love to humiliate. They love to make people feel so worthless.
It's cancel culture as well.
Yeah, it's the your opinion is a danger to this world, and so we need to censor you through not through any logical way, but through some very illogical, hateful, almost kind of it becomes. There's no word for it. It's toxic. It is so toxic.
No, it definitely is.
It makes you depressed as a person. You don't want to get into. There have been times I wanted to quit. I want to quit all of it. I just want to go back to my sedentary life where I didn't care about anything back in the day. Because, when you're getting, and that is all because of social media, because it also exemplifies your own sense of self-importance.
Yeah.
Because when you have like 30 comments about your own post, suddenly you think that the whole world's looking at you. And you feel like, my God, okay, wow. And then you think suddenly that everyone's just thinking about you. They're not. But social media has a great way of making it seem as if your opinion matters to that extent, that other people's opinion of you is exemplified. What would have just been a conversation becomes a public argument on a platform that everyone can just watch and comment on, and it's not good. And it goes back again to this idea of filtering opinions that don't agree with you. So I know that people on my Facebook don't see any pro-social public policy posts, or they don't see any posts that hold to account the Conservative Party. So I kind of like the devil's advocate, I post. I make posts about how the party's failing in certain ways. So for instance, I don't know if you've recently seen the BBC article that talks about how NHS waiting times are the highest they've ever been. Disgusted when I read that article. I was absolutely disgusted by it. It is not the failure of the hospitals. It is not the failure of the hard-working doctors and nurses. It is the failure of public policy. It is the failure of governments. And who's the government that's been in charge? It's been the government that I support. So what do you do in that situation? You can either put your hands in your pocket, put your earphones on, forget about it. I didn't hear that. Oh, maybe the Conservative Party is just fine. Don't you worry. No. Or you can be the one that calls out these things when you see them. Because that is what you're meant to do. It doesn't matter where you align yourself. I'm still going to vote Conservative, but I will hold to account the party that brings about negative sort of policies that affect people's lives. So you just have to be careful. I think social media can be a very toxic place. I would say if there's any bit of advice I could give for anyone, it's that they should probably come off Facebook, probably come off Instagram, and probably keep Snapchat, because it's a great way to have DMs and whatnot. But stay away from these public forums, because they don't provide you with news, they provide you with opinions. And if you want to be bombarded with opinions that either are completely for you or completely against you, then that's great. But if you want to have a balanced opinion and you want to get real variation, go to a reliable news source rather than these platforms, which I think are at the moment abhorrent.
I feel like it's important to clarify that. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously. You don't mean just stay off... I mean, obviously, it'll be good to stay off Facebook, but, like, if you want to be politically active, then Facebook and other social media sites are not the best place for that participation.
Exactly, you need to be making a difference in other ways, and more, face-to-face conversations are necessary if you want to get involved in politics. You want to get involved in actual change, with changing the world for the better. It doesn't come through sitting on your computer and typing hateful comments to people, because 100%. that doesn't make a difference. What it does is it makes someone hate themselves. It makes people sad. It makes people depressed. It probably, and there's no stats I can use to back this up, but it most probably has negatively affected the rate at which, or positively affected, the rate at which suicides happen. I think there are more suicides because of social media than not. And I think that if you want to get involved in public work such as politics, you're going to be getting some comments. I'll tell you that.
So you said that it's better to be face to face, but I know that you had this thing with the posters, which I remember very well, of course, from the speak. But if you'd like to explain to the listeners, essentially, how do you feel as a conservative on campus in the university in the UK?
What happened with the posters? As a conservative, I feel marginalised. I feel I'm held in a corner, and my opinion doesn't really matter much, and that I'm essentially seen as not serious. And what I mean by that is the example that you use with the posters. So we had events coming up in September or October, I think it was October time, where we had Jacob Rees-Mogg. Love him or hate him, he was coming to the university to talk.
And this is before
this is before, way before. But people disliked him even then. He wasn't the most popular fellow in terms of university environments. But this is what's funny. We set up the event as an open event. We had every right to make this a conservative-only event, for conservatives only, for Jacob Rees-Mogg to only tell his fans what he thinks the world should be, and his fans cheering away. But I thought, no. I thought this isn't right, because here we have a man in government. Well, at the time he wasn't, but, it was always dibbed that he would be. A man with great influence coming to the university. I think it's only right that people from all political affiliations come and question this individual on what they feel matter to them. So I opened up the event to everyone, and I put posters up. We only had a £5 fee, because obviously as an association you're trying to raise money, and this is a huge prolific speaker. You want to raise a bit of money for these events.
I think as you said, it's a very big
it's a very big speaker. Exactly. And for it to only be £5 as well, I thought was brilliant. But what ended up happening is I put posters up. I put about 100 a day. Within 5 hours, I'd come back to the university. About 70% of those posters ripped down, just ripped off. The other 30 defiled. So there were incidences where I saw posters with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and the poster had a face of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but it would have been altered so that it made it look like he looked like Hitler and whatnot, and just these sorts of things. It was just rude, and it makes you feel as someone who's trying to reach out and trying to bridge the divide. You feel, or I felt like there's no point. No wonder it's a tribal thing. No wonder conservatives don't come out and talk to you. No wonder no one wants to communicate different ideas anymore, because every time you do, you're kind of just you're stepped on.
Yeah.
You're treated like nothing, and I think that's completely unacceptable. Especially in a university where you're meant to this is meant to be the year where opinions mean everything. Having a range of ideas means everything. Coming to terms with new ideas and being exposed to new ideas, it's a huge thing at university. So the fact that these posters were defiled in the way that they were, the fact that they were torn down in the way they were, essentially amounted to censorship. People hoping that this event could just go away, that it would never come back. How is that right? Do you know what I mean? How does that address the divide? How does that fix people's lives? It doesn't do any of those things. What it does is it inflames divisions further. It makes people hate each other more. And then what it essentially did is it confirmed to the committee, the Conservative Committee, of which I'm a part of, that we don't want to host these events for anyone else but Conservatives in the future, which I don't want. I don't want to see that. But the committee, they have no choice but to make that decision, because essentially we've been forced into a position where you have to just close off events because you don't want that hate affecting your association.
So with the majority of the posters, as you said, taken down, ripped off, whatever, would you say that? Well, not would you say? How was the turnout? Like, did a lot of people?
So no, we had to cancel the event in the end, and it was a range of reasons. One of them being the proroguing of Parliament, and so it just ended up being a little bit of a messy one. And then obviously the Supreme Court was like, well, it's not overruled, and so Parliament basically re-adjourned. And Jacob Rees-Mogg couldn't attend, so he messaged and said he couldn't come. We're like, okay, that's fair enough, that's fine. But what's funny is we had to sit in a room with police, Leeds University security. We had to sit in a room with the dean of the universities and all these staff officials, and they had literally said that, because of the prolific nature of the speaker, because of how big he is, essentially, so many contingency plans had to be put into place, and it felt so unnatural. And all these backups and all this police and all this bureaucracy that suddenly had to come into play because essentially we were being threatened by multiple different organisations on the matter of his attendance. It just goes to show. I mean, they had Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour Party had Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not saying that the Labour Party that did this. It's not. It was a variety of people from a variety of different opinions, and they're all too right to have their opinion. But I want to stress this to everyone listening to this podcast. You might disagree with me. I don't necessarily disagree with it. If you disagree with me, fine. Okay, that's good that you disagree with me. Great, we can have a conversation.
It's healthy to disagree.
But let's have a healthy conversation around that then. And let's not just go to this tribal 2-year-old mindset where you disagree with me and now you disagree with me, so therefore you're going to threaten any event I make. You're going to try to jeopardize any kind of cohesion that is attempted to be made. You are looking for one thing and one thing alone. You're looking to destroy my opinion, and that's it. How is that? It's massive.
I agree with you 100%. Like when I used to be on Twitter, but I'm not anymore. And it's literally because every time I logged onto Twitter, I'd had maybe like 70 followers, and I followed like 70 people, and there was pretty much a person from every perspective, every viewpoint, like in terms of politics, not politics, everything. And everything that I saw, not everything, but I'd say a good 80% of the things that I saw were incredibly like, well, marginalizing, I think that's the right word. Like they weren't open to debate. They weren't open to anything really. And I feel like a lot of people feel that their posts on their, because you post and it's kind of like on your page and it's your timeline, and I feel like a lot of people believe that if they post something on there, then it doesn't matter if anyone has any issues, like any problems with it, any healthy discussion, like opinions towards that post. They feel they posted it on their story, that's it, that's theirs, that's fact. If you disagree with it, you're wrong, anything like that. And
you were there at the debate that was held. Just for anyone who didn't know about this, so there was an intersocietal debate held by the Leeds Debate Union, and it hosted the Leeds Labour Society, and it hosted the Leeds Conservatives, and I was the spokesperson for the Leeds Conservatives. And you saw, you were in the crowd that day. You saw the disparity that was in that crowd. You saw how 95% of those questions were aimed at me alone. I get that public opinion within universities about Conservatives is questioned, often, and not really the most respected. So that's fine. Okay, cool. But certain comments were made by certain people in that crowd that were just unacceptable. They categorized me, threw me into a identity that I didn't identify with, but they categorized me as a certain
Tory
way.
boy.
Yeah, you Tory boy. That's what they call me. What Tory boy? You are that. That's it. Finished. There is no reason to discuss with this individual anything because he is a Tory boy.
The comments that I heard, I was sitting at the back and I was surrounded by people essentially, and pretty much like half of the things that you said were just being like whispered, like, nah, that's wrong. And not once have I heard anyone say why exactly what you said was wrong. It's just always you reply something, it's not Labour, so you're wrong automatically. And like there was the girl who was sitting behind me, like right at the back, who was shouting at you about the Jacob Rees-Mogg situation. It's baffling to me how people, well, as you said, like they just put you in this identity that you don't even have to necessarily identify with yourself. They just put you in it, and then that's it. They're above you. They're like on this hierarchy, and they're literally they're just above you in their opinion, simply because they think that Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, didn't have to perform in the university.
Exactly. Like, if I could say one thing on a sort of maximizing on what impact I can make in this world, right? I don't like how I'm categorized as a conservative. I wouldn't call myself just a conservative, because I don't like terming people under so if I see somebody supports Labour, I don't think they're a Labourite. I don't think you're just a Labour boy or a Labour I don't think that. I think they're a human being who has a variety of opinions that align very closely to a political affiliate, to a political party. And the same goes for me. I'm an individual with a variety of opinions, but that my opinions align very closely to another political party. Now, funnily enough, there are people in the Conservative Party who do think things that you could categorize as like, wow, that's a questionable opinion, and I've seen enough of those, believe me. And it's you have to be careful as a society not to shoot someone down solely for who they affiliate themselves with, because for all and this is this goes back to my personal example. I fight tooth and nail for what I believe is socially acceptable. If I see something that I disagree with fundamentally, I stand up and say something. And that doesn't necessarily have to be against another political party or opponent. It can be within the same party that I affiliate myself with. And actually 9 times out of 10, I find myself disagreeing with Tories more so than I find myself
wrong party.
Well, maybe no, I don't think I'm not necessarily meaning that way, but more like it's that when I'm within my own affiliate association, I'm conversing with them more often than I'm conversing, say, with Labourites or Liberal Democrats, these sorts of individuals. So because I'm in my association and I have my group and I have my friends who are Tories and they believe what they believe, I have my conversations with them, and I find myself consistently arguing against where they stand on certain aspects. But I'm aware that they don't represent the entire party, number one. That I'm aware, number two, that their opinion fluctuates as much as mine would. But that as well as that, whenever if I saw someone who supports Labour, I don't immediately think that they represent the entire Labour Party.
100%.
So that's the point I'm trying to come across with. Don't categorise people so quickly. Have the decency to converse with them. Have the decency to ask them what they really believe. And if you find by the end of that conversation that actually I don't want to talk to this person ever again because their opinion is questionable, then fine, okay. But for the majority of people, and I really would like to say the majority of people, all they want to do is have a decent conversation, and they want to exchange ideas. So give them the respect that they deserve and hear them out.
Yeah.
Even if you disagree with them. I have had lots of conversations with people I disagree with, but I at least hear them out because it's so important to hear what the opposition says at all times, and that way you can develop yourself and your philosophy far clearer.
Definitely. That's the thing. I feel like completely forgot what I was going to say. Not gonna lie. Oh right, yeah. I feel like a lot of people just, well, essentially people are obviously very, very, very complex, and there is so many issues. And I think this is kind of going back to that the world's not black and white point. Like there are so many things that, so many opinions that a person can have on so many different things, and even on a certain thing people can have more than one opinion. Like I feel like it's very silly in a way to just hear one opinion and then correlate that one opinion with
ridiculous,
other people.
But you'd be surprised just how often it happens.
Yeah.
Because we love to categorize, we love to stereotype. Imagine for a second if I had and I'm very careful here what I'm about to say, but when we stereotype people, we are smart enough as a society to know that when if I were to make a stereotype of a Russian, that's not representative of all Russians.
Yeah, no.
But I would assume a stereotype of Russian is a hardcore Putin-esque vodka drinking, Gopnik-esque kind of guy. Really cool, loves to do that mad stuff. Can fix a car in less than 30 seconds and loves Adidas.
Easy,
very easy stereotype. But I'm almost certain that doesn't apply to all Russians.
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like when people generalize something like politics, it's a lot easier to generalize that than generalizing things like, for example, religion. Like if you generalize religion, then you're awful human being, which is obviously fair enough.
So we learn as a society not to generalize religion, because we know that if we generalize religion, you end up coming out with Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Christian hate, anti-Hindu hate, anti-Sikh hate. And that you see that across the country when that happens. So what does the government do? It cracks down on it. So then we have stereotypes, and how do we crack down on racism? Well, you break those stereotypes. You realize actually black empowerment, realizing that if you are from a certain ethnicity, that you're not just this caricature that history has kind of not history, but people in history have accumulated and associated with that culture. So if we're smart enough as a society now to have realized that by stereotyping things that you cause division, and we're trying to deal with things like racism right now, which which is questionable in how well we're doing in dealing with that. In terms of religion, questionable again how we're doing with that. But the fact that no argument has been put across for political opinion, because political opinion is the most stereotyped. If you're a Tory, you're a rich person. You only care about the rich. That's all you care for. No, it's not true. If you're a Labourer, you only care for the poor. Not true again. I don't believe it's true. So it works both ways. So I'm not going to assume someone who supports Labour hates the rich. I don't believe that. I believe certain people in the Labour Party definitely do. I don't believe that's the position of a whole party of a whole spectrum party that once had the likes of Tony Blair lead that party. Tony Blair was a very well-educated man from a very well-off family, went to a very good school, went to Oxford and Eton, was in all ways a Tory, except the fact that he was actually a Labour MP, and then became the Labour Prime Minister, or the Prime Minister of the country, but for the Labour Party. So the Labour Party is not one single identity. So I can't stand here and say I hate people who support Labour because they are this. No, I can't say that. But what I can say is I look at the policy and I question only the facts. I don't deal with if, buts, or maybes. I only deal with the facts. What did the policy say, and what do I think of the policies?
Do you feel like, unlike religion, so like religion generalizing is just across the board, like everyone agrees it's not good. With something like politics, do you feel like politicians, in a way, don't help themselves by focusing on certain issues which are definitely going to divide the nations, but they know it will get them seats?
So now we get into this topic of the efficacy of being a politician, and
Efficacy is in like the ability to put stuff into power for anyone who doesn't.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, what as a politician, you know, who are you looking out for? Number one, are you looking out for your constituents? Are you looking out for the general country? Are you looking out for yourself?
Yeah.
That's the three things that a politician has to ask themselves, because you can have politicians who only represent their constituency. Brilliant stuff. I like that kind of democracy. I really do. You know, a politician who only cares
to be.
Yeah, exactly. A politician who only cares about what his constituents feel, his or hers. Sorry, I don't know, his, hers, or anything else. So you have that, and then you have the politicians who are career politicians. They were born and raised, and all they wanted in life was to be a politician. They don't care what party. They don't care what the opinion is. They will just jump on the popular opinion, and they will ride that train to the top. You can answer who you think in the current situation people like that are. Yeah. But I'm not gonna express that opinion because I think it might get in a lot of trouble. And number three, you have those who care about the country as a whole. So the politicians who come into a constituency and they don't necessarily think about their constituents, they think about the greater national good. So whenever they vote on something, they vote on the perspective of the whole nation rather than on the perspective of just their constituents. So there are different ways of looking at it, and I think that obviously there are two of those ways are fine. So looking at it from a national point of view, that's great. Great for a politician to do that. And you have politicians think on a local level, which is great again, because you're really representing your actual like constituents, which is exactly kind of the way it actually should be. And then the third way, the most popular way, is to just jump on whatever's popular at the time. So 10 years ago, you had, you know, things like, you know, you had so many issues, but, you know, a good example would just be, you know, the immigration aspect, you know, the migrants or the people that was in before that, actually. Yeah, those things before that, actually. There was just so many crazy ones. Oh, the war in Iraq, for instance, right? That's a weird one, but that's actually not. Actually, let's say war in Iraq was a really complicated one. I could go into hours about that one. Let's say the Syrian conflict, right? Yeah. So, if you're a constituent of like just of a random constituency up north, let's say Leeds Northwest, you're the MP for Leeds Northwest, you only care about people in Leeds Northwest constituency. Your constituents don't care about Syria. On a real, you know, not disrespectful, they just don't care. That's not what their agenda's about. So as a politician, anything about Syria, you're going to be, that's not what we're here for. You know, you're going to focus on your constituents. My constituents need food, they need shelter, they need this, they need that. Let's focus on that. So you only vote for things that for your constituents. Great. Then you have the ones who look on the national level, right? So you have the politicians from, say, the same constituency, but he has a different perspective now. So now he's looking at it from a national point of view. So the war against, the intervention with Syria. We stand as a country for democracy, A. We stand as a country against chemical weapons, number 2. Efficacy in warfare, number 3. We don't believe in dictators, number 4. And we don't believe that we should support in any way a dictatorship or a force that oppresses its people. So from that perspective, yes, you should intervene and probably do something about it, so you vote on that way. But then the third way, the most insidious way, is when you look out for yourself, right? So you're just sitting there and you're looking at where the public opinion is. What does the public want? Does the public want a war? You know, are they feeling conflict? Will it improve my prospects? If we win this war, will I get into a higher position in office? I'm not going to name the politicians who I feel are like that, but there are so many. They don't care about the constituents, they don't care about the country. They care about what can they do that can get them to the top. And that is the toxicity of government today, is that the Conservative government falls short in being able to prevent these sorts of politicians from existing. The Labour Party falls short in letting these politicians like this exist. And the Liberal Democrats and every other party. There are so many opportunists in that building that it's, you know, you wonder really who you can trust anymore. And this is where the whole fake news thing comes into play. And if there's one thing I could credit Donald Trump for doing, it's exposing the hidden agendas of people in politics. And even though he himself is a man of agenda, a man who looks out for himself at all costs, because he's so obvious about it, he doesn't try to hide that.
Yeah.
He's almost done us the whole world a favor in making us realize, oh gosh, well, actually, how many other people like that are there?
Yeah, definitely.
And you start to realize actually it's huge, and our current leader might fall short in that area as well. I really believe it.
Well, we have essentially 7 minutes left. Before we wrap up, two things. One, obviously we didn't get to talk about the Conservatives' policy, and not really a lot about Brexit, apart from like right at the beginning, but that's alright. This is going to be part one, just going to be the more discussion based. The second part will be discussion based on policies specifically. But I'd like to ask one final question. I feel like this would be the best round-up question I could ask. Obviously, the show is called Impartial Discussion.
Okay.
Would you say that you are biased with things like certain things that you can't say, for example, because you feel like it could negatively impact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not going to sit here right now and tell you that I've given you my exact opinion on everything. And there are definitely things I would like to say that I know if I say would cost me a nice bit of opportunity in my life. Yeah. Am I an opportunist? No, because I have still addressed, I believe, a lot of things that I find upset me and make me very tense about politics. 100%. But overall, I'd say, look, one thing: it's don't be so cavalier as to throw your opinion at people and to consistently just express things that come into your head, because I could tell you 1,000 things I think, but I can't say for certain. So definitely. If I've been reserved today, it's not that I've necessarily wanted to not talk about it. It's more that I just don't feel confident enough to say something about that. I wouldn't say I've been the most impartial today. I've definitely I'm a conservative. I support conservatism. I am firmly for conservative identity and redefining what conservative identity means. If I ever get the opportunity to be on this podcast again, I would love to talk about
next week, easy.
Conservative identity and how I think the Conservative Party should be if it wants to see public support from a more wider audience. We could be, and I really believe this, I'm going to say this, I believe the Conservative Party can be the party for all. I believe the Conservative Party can be the party that everyone can hold on to and feel safe with. And I feel, on top of all of that, the Conservative Party could be the absolute catalyst of change for better. But I equally believe that if we continue on this road of partisan politics, if we continue on this road of it has to be one way or the highway, if we have to stick to political spectrums and you are either left or you are right, there is no alternative, then I think that we're a real risk here of damaging this country and damaging our future and damaging our children's future. And I'll just say that if I could wrap things up in a little quick sentence, it would be the centre ground isn't this bureaucratic, awful place where nothing gets done and people are just out there for their own good, and they're just sitting there capitalizing on every aspect of everyone's problems from left to right. The way I look at the center ground is it's like a bow and arrow, and you have the top end and you have the bottom end, and the top end is the left, bottom end is the right, and the bow itself, the string, is the center ground, and where you pull on that string, they come together, and it's the energy, it's the intensity of both sides, the nationalism of the right mixed with the public care on the left, together can confuse to create, I think, a government that could work for everyone. And I really believe that. And until 100%. We realise that as a people, we're a real loss until such a day. But it's been an absolute pleasure being on the show.
Thank you for being a guest, first guest of all, as well. Just to fully wrap things up, I'd just like to say thank you for listening. Obviously, it's been a more long episode than normal, but that's expected, of course. Apologies that we didn't actually get on to talk about the main things that we wanted to talk about, but there's so much to cover that part 2 is definitely going to have to come out, and that's where you will hear the nitty-gritty of the Conservatives' policies, and once again you'll get your chance to ask more questions. But just to wrap things up, I'd just like to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for wanting to be smarter than you were yesterday. And on that note, Yeah, have a great day.